political science professors, one out of Clemson, one out of Texas A&M, specifically looked at this research, and what they found was this. White people that said that they don't want to live next door to an immigrant or to people of another race were more supportive of the ideas of military rule or a strongman type of leader who would ignore legislatures and election results. Boom. Who does that sound like? Who does that sound like? So what this research shows here is that white people who are racially intolerant and who believe that people of color will benefit from democracy actually themselves no longer want democracy. They want a dictator. They want a military, strong-armed leader. They want someone who's not going to have elections. They want someone who's going to rule via the military. That is exactly what they want. We are mistaken if we believe that they actually want democracy. They don't want democracy. They want a racially driven autocratic system where they will remain in power, period. Welcome to this week's episode of Fearless Politics. So much has been happening on the home front with the battles that we've been facing with regards to our voting rights. But I come to you today with good news. I come to you today to give you an update. Because if there's one thing that I know is that we know how to fight back. And the reality is they came for the Black vote, and guess what? We were not having it. We have been fighting back. And so I wanted to share with you today some of the good news about what has been happening and how it is that when we fight, we win. All right. Now, a lot of these battles obviously are still in progress, but I do want you to be encouraged in knowing that we have fought back and we have at least had some interim victories, and we're going to make these complete victories as we move forward. So I want to give you a little insight on that. And I want to talk a little bit about what's going on with these Trump voters that is making them so intransigent when it comes to a lot of these issues that are going on now. You might be wondering yourself, with everything that's happening, this crazy ass war, this $5 plus gas prices that's going to continue to go up because clearly this fool has no idea what he's doing. All of the various projects that he's wasting money on willy-nilly. How the hell is it that even though he has historic low approval ratings, there's still a very solid 30-some% of the population that is specifically in step with him? Well, if you've been wondering what the hell is going on in their minds, I'm unpacking that today. And let me just say it has to do with a very, very stark commitment to white supremacy. With that said, let's go ahead and get into it. You all know that everything that's been happening since Calais, you had a rush to legislatures all across the South that were looking at how they can go about diluting Black voting power, how they can go about erasing districts. Some have been successful. Some have not even started that process. Some have decided whether or not they're going to do it now or later. I want to give you some updates on what's been happening and how we have been part of the pushback that has been occurring right now that honestly is putting a stop, or at least slowing down, the retrenchment of our voting rights that was at the center of this Supreme Court decision in the first place. They wanted the day to come when you would have states all across the South in particular go about the business of erasing majority Black districts. And some of them did. But I have to say, we have been on it. We have been fighting back. Many of you were part of the All Roads Lead South demonstration that happened right after it, right? Within 1 week of the announcement of that decision, you had 100 busloads of people come down there. You had 80 actions all across the nation. So there was immediate action right there to let the world know that, hey, we're going to fight back. But we haven't stopped there. We have been engaging in other activities. And I want to let you know what has happened as a result. So let you know what's been happening. Number one, we have seen record turnout in voting and early voting in southern states. So, for example, we saw a record turnout in Georgia with regards to their voting down there. We've seen record turnout when it comes to South Carolina with regards to their early voting down there. In fact, with South Carolina, we saw just yesterday, as of the time of this recording, 55,000 votes cast on the first day of early voting. The previous record was 18,000 votes on the first day. So just completely blew that out of the water. And why is this important? This overrepresentation, this overpowering of the Black vote in southern states are, I believe, intimidating lawmakers down there to let them know, hey, we're going to come out in force. We understand what you are doing. So we're going to do what we need to do in order to protect our voting rights. And when you make a statement like that, people listen. People stop, drop, and listen and start to rethink what they're going to do. So we know, for example, that Georgia's governor has already said he's not going to redraw any lines right now. He is considering doing it for 2028. We will see if he actually follows up on that. Because I have to tell you, when we come out like we're supposed to during the midterms, we're going to get to a place where that intimidation factor, I believe, is going to be so stark that he's probably going to fall off of that too, okay? And we've already seen the same thing happen in South Carolina. The South Carolina State Senate voted against redistricting in that state, 26-18, y'all. It wasn't even close, okay? So the South Carolina Senate said, no, we are not redrawing these lines down there. Once again, they may do it in 2028. We will see. We'll have to keep on them. But for now, we have won this battle. We've also seen how in Alabama that went ahead through and got rid of one of their only two majority Black districts in that state. We do see that there was a federal court ruling in our favor, where the federal court judges, two of which were Trump appointees, who said, no, this is illegal. In fact, specifically, what these judges said was that with regards to the construction of these two districts, this new plan was, and I quote, tainted by intentional race-based discrimination. Boom. And because of that, they struck it down. Now, I will say that the Attorney General of Alabama is going to appeal this up to the Supreme Court. So we will see what the Supreme Court does. But the whole point here that I want you to understand is that we are fighting. We are fighting back and we are winning. And it doesn't stop there. Mississippi, the state of Mississippi, has decided not to do any redrawing of their lines at all in terms of this particular cycle. Once again, they might come to it and reconsider it for 2028. But for now, they are reading the writing on the wall and they are not going there. And in fact, even beyond that, there is some rumblings of the fact that there may be some possibility. And now I have to say, it's a long shot. But there are those who are looking at the polls and they're considering that it may in fact be possible that you could have a Democratic senator out of Mississippi. And there happens to be a Black man running for senator on the Democratic side in Mississippi this year. So the idea of having a Black person winning statewide in Mississippi to the U.S. Senate is huge. There's some thought that that might in fact be a long shot possibility if we are seeing these great turnout rates that we're seeing in these other states. If we are seeing it in Mississippi, it could be enough to bring him over the line. Listen, Mississippi is almost 40% Black. The challenge is that historically, it's also a state where the Black population underperforms in terms of voter turnout rates. But one of the things I will say is true that we're seeing as a result of everything that's happened just in a few weeks since the Calais decision. And that is this fact: Black people fight back. We fight back. And it's also this other kind of rule that we know in life. When somebody tells you not to do something, that's precisely the time when you want to do something. So I am seeing the Black community fight back all throughout the South in these elections that have happened in the interim period between the Kale decision and now, we are seeing huge, like record-breaking turnout rates. If we can continue in this trend, this is exactly what we need to do in order to take this moment in which our political power is under attack and use it to our advantage. Here's what I really want to say about this. Our whole conception about political power needs to be shifted. We need to understand that, yes, we can have political power when we are able to have someone in office that looks like us. But we also need to understand that's not the only situation in which we can have political power. We can have political power when we sway the election of whoever we're voting for, such that even in those spaces like in Kentucky or in other states that may end up redrawing their lines, and now we're in a different district. It's happening right now in Florida. It's a little controversial, right? What's going on in Florida, because you have a Democrat, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, basically taking her little happy ass over to a district that is now 40% Black. And that is the largest concentration of the new districts that they have developed. And it looks like she is going to be a very formidable candidate in that space. She definitely comes in there with already a significant multi-million-dollar war chest. And there have been multiple Black folk who have already thrown their hat in the ring for that race, including Uncle Luke, formerly of the 2 Live crew. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens in that race. But the bottom line is we need to understand that we flex our political power when we show up at large levels, no matter who is on the ticket, and then hold them accountable after the elections. So we'll see what happens there. The bottom line here is that a sleeping giant has been awakened. A sleeping giant has been awakened. And it's so important that it has been awakened, because I have to tell you, this whole attack on our voting rights, it has really made me see how much so many of us had gone to sleep, honestly, over the past couple of generations. The reality is we are not that far into our ability to vote in this nation. And so many of us had gotten to the point where we had dismissed it, taken it for granted, not taking it seriously, falling for the okie doke with all of the lies and basically the targeting of the Black community with misinformation, coming to believe that, hey, it doesn't matter if I vote, they're both the same, all of that mess. And look at what's happened under this administration. If you ever needed proof that there is a difference here, and the difference is pretty fucking big, we have seen it. Because I will tell you one thing, had we not gotten this fool in office in the first place, allowing him the opportunity to now have 3 people on the Supreme Court, we would not be here. And here we are with reproductive rights completely gutted, with voting rights completely gutted, with affirmative action in higher education eliminated. And those are just in terms of Supreme Court decisions. Let's not even talk about everything that's happened via executive order under this tyrant that we have in this office. So even though Trump's big behind was standing in a Black church a few years ago talking about, what do you have to lose? The reality is we have found out that we've had a lot to lose. Our voting rights to lose, our reproductive rights to lose, hundreds of millions of dollars collectively in terms of contracts canceled for Black businesses, in terms of jobs lost as a result of purging of the federal government, which is disproportionately made up of Black workers, with regards to the trickle-down effects of the attack on DEI, in which corporations have been pressured to end programs, therefore hurting our ability to enter and get promotions within those spaces and to do business with those institutions. We've had a lot to lose. So I think this very difficult set of circumstances that we have now found ourselves under hopefully has woken us up to the critical nature of participating in the process, of making sure that our voices are heard, of making sure that we are there each and every time. And when we do that, we can make a difference. I pulled together some statistics here that I want to share with you, just looking at the last presidential election, to really be able to make it clear to you how important our vote is. Sometimes we really underestimate how powerful we are, but when I break this down for you, you're going to see just how critical our vote is. So I'm going to break this down state by state, looking just at the 2024, the last presidential election, the election that got this disaster in office. All right. In Georgia, Trump beat Kamala by 115,000 votes. That was in a state where you had nearly 200,000 registered Black voters that didn't even show up to vote. Bam. And an additional 900,000 Black voters who were eligible to vote but were unregistered. Let me say that again so you can really, really let that sink in. Trump won Georgia by 115,000 votes, but there were nearly 200,000 Black registered voters that didn't even show up to vote, and another 900,000 that were eligible to vote but were not registered. But that's not all. Look at Michigan. Trump won Michigan by 81,000 votes. But in that same state, there were over 170,000 registered Black voters that did not show up to vote. And then there was another 250,000 plus who were eligible to be registered but did not register at all. And I'm getting these stats from the census, by the way. Pennsylvania, Trump won Pennsylvania by 120,000 votes. In that same state, you had nearly 100,000 registered Black voters that did not vote, but you also had an additional 300,000 who were eligible to vote but were not registered. North Carolina, I'll give you one more. Trump won North Carolina by 183,000 votes. In that same election, we had over 100,000 Black voters who were registered but did not vote. And you had an additional 600,000 who were eligible but unregistered. So what is the pattern that you're seeing here? The pattern that you're seeing here is that we have unrealized Black political power when we are not maximizing our vote. And each and every one of those states, had we maximized our vote, all of those states could have flipped and we would not be in the mess that we're in right now. And so I'm hoping that we will learn. We will learn from that. And especially at a moment in which they are trying to rip our voting power away from us, we will understand that we have much more power than we have exercised, and make it our business to make sure that we maximize our voting power moving forward, especially right now when it's under attack. Now, I will say there are several different ways that we can fight back. Maximizing the voting power is key. We have to do that. But that's not the only way people are fighting back right now in terms of this attack on our voting rights. Many of you have probably heard about the specific call by the NAACP and others for Black student athletes not to go to SEC schools. These are schools that are in the Southern Conference. That is, particularly when it comes to football, is a huge moneymaker for many of those schools. And I will have to say, I think it's a good strategy. Here's the reality. Those schools make tons of money from these folks. And I know that there's NIL money that's available now. And I remember years ago, I was one of those people that were saying that student athletes at colleges should get paid given the amount of money that they bring into those institutions. But I also know that the SEC is not the only conference that has NIL money. And if you're good enough to play at Ole Miss, if you're good enough to play at Alabama, if you're good enough to play at LSU, I believe that there are lots of other schools in this nation who would also pay you gobs of money to play there too. I'm old enough to remember when there was this one student athlete in South Carolina who said, I will not play for this institution. He was the top, I believe he was a wide receiver for the top university in South Carolina. And he's like, I'm not going to play if we don't get rid of the Confederate flag that we're finding at the State House. This was after the murders at Mother Emanuel Church, in which Black parishioners were shot down by a white supremacist. And as soon as he said that, guess what? They took that damn flag down. Here's what I know, particularly in some of these states, like Alabama, like Louisiana, like Mississippi, football is a huge, huge deal. Not only in terms of the money that it brings those institutions, but it is a cultural institution in those states, right? It's a huge thing. And let's just be real. Good luck if they were to field an all-white football team. Good luck with that. In fact, I feel like taking it a step further, if you want to get rid of DEI, okay, have it apply in every respect. Have it apply in every respect. Why not have Ole Miss? Why not have LSU? Why not have Alabama apply it in every respect? No one goes to that school, including the athletes, unless they have met your specific arbitrary little arbitrary standards that you have for everyone in that school. And good luck fielding a football team without our talents. A 100% nerd football team, good luck with that. And as a nerd, I can say that, but good luck with that. It's really interesting how you have this come out there. And guess what just happened this week? You had the SEC, which is that conference, hire their own crisis management firm, Black male-led crisis management firm. Interesting. They decided that they needed to hire a crisis manager. Well, yeah, you do. They needed their own little fixer. You know what that shows me? That shows me that they know that would be effective. That shows me that they know that they are threatened. That shows me that they know that they need to do everything that they can to keep those Black athletes at those schools, while at the same time undermining the Black vote in those states. That shows me that they know what they're doing. And so, if anything, this tells me that this specific strategy makes sense. It is making them nervous. It's making them scared. That they need to now have a little fixer come in and help them with this so that they can keep those Black athletes there. I, for one, am hoping that critical ones, it doesn't have to be everyone, but critical ones say, no, I am not going to go there. I can get just as much money or more money if I go to Penn, if I go to Michigan, if I go to USC, whatever. Now, I just did a little looking today because I was curious about how much money these schools are making from their football programs. They are making somewhere over 100 to over 200 million per year in terms of the amount of revenue they're getting, largely from donors. And I specifically looked at Ole Miss, LSU, and Alabama. They're making somewhere between 100 and 200 million per year. And then on top of that, they each make over 72 million specifically from their television contracts alone. Come on now. That's a lot of money. This does not sit right with my soul. That we're talking about these states playing around with our voting rights, while at the same time they want to sit there and watch those Black bodies go up and down the field for their entertainment. Nah, those brothers need to know that if they can make money there, they can make money at other institutions. They definitely can. All right. So let's talk about this. This is another thing that happened in terms of fighting back. The Congressional Black Caucus the other day had a press conference in which they pressured companies in the U.S. come out vocally opposing the Republican redistricting push. Now, I thought this was interesting. I'm feeling some kind of way about this because honestly, I don't really even understand what the fuck they expect corporations to do about the voting. Honestly, I don't understand the strategy behind this. This makes no sense to me. Why? What do they expect them to do? It would have been much more strategic and relevant had they gone to those companies at the time when Trump was writing all these executive orders about DEI. Like, that would have made sense because that would have been within the realm of what these companies could do. But no, Trump spent a whole year attacking that all the way up until just a couple of months ago. And they waited months to come out with even just a little statement about it. It's very disappointing to me that when Black folk have been under economic attack by this administration for well over a year, ever since his very first day in office, they've been kind of MIA. They were late out of the blocks. I'll at least say that. Super late out of the blocks. They're definitely on it when it comes to this. Understandably so, because it's directly impacting them. I just don't understand what this is supposed to do, though, in terms of asking companies to oppose Republican redistricting. It seems performative to me. I don't even understand how that helps anything, honestly. But that's what they're doing. All right. So I say the thing that really gets me, though, about this whole situation, and I think the reason why it's so visceral for many of us to be completely true, is because I think about the history of everything that it took for us to get here in terms of having voting rights. It is infuriating. It's infuriating that we fought this long and we fought this hard and we've had this for such a short amount of time, given how long we've been here, and we're still fighting. It's infuriating. I have gone through the whole step by step of this previously, but when I really think about this here, listen, we are this year going to be celebrating 250 years of this nation's existence. And the reality is that Black people have been here well before this nation was a nation. We gave this country 250 years of free labor. Fought in every war, including the Revolutionary War. Fought in the Civil War. Kicked the South's ass. The Negro regiments were the reason that the tide of the Civil War was turned such that the Union won. We went through all of that, 250 years. And then after that war, there was the first civil rights advancements that we experienced, right? The 13th, the 14th, the 15th Amendments. Those amendments ended slavery. They gave us citizenship. They extended the franchise. And for 12 years, after being here 250 years, only for 12 years, where Black men extended the franchise. During that time, you had Black men elected to Congress. You had Black men elected throughout state legislatures. Thousands, literally thousands of different elected officials all across the South during that period of time. You even had more Black men who were governor then than you do now. And you only had that period for 12 years until the retrenchment came with Jim Crow. And I know most of us think of this from the standpoint of clauses and poll taxes and literacy tests, all those things that they put into place to rip away our voting rights. But that really wasn't all. And that really wasn't the main thing, I would argue, that brought in that era. What brought in that era was white terrorism. What brought in that era was the complete evil that was white violence in this nation. And so you had a period of time in which literally 1 out of 5 Black men who were elected to Congress were murdered during that period. The very first person who was elected to Congress in this nation who was murdered was a Black person. You literally had thousands of Black people murdered during the Jim Crow period. Thousands. And a good chunk of those were murdered specifically around seeking to vote or to register people to vote. This right came as a result of fighting specifically and being willing to die for this cause. Countless of us died because of this. And of course, because of the terroristic activity that occurred, died at the hands of people that never, ever had to face justice. And so this whole issue of having these voting rights attacked, it's personal to me. It's even bigger than being able to vote for one particular person. It's about honoring the sacrifices of those who gave their lives so that I could have the right to vote. And then when you think about the recency of it all, when we come into this world, it's almost like we think the world starts with our existence. The world didn't start with our existence. And this is exactly why they are trying to hide our history, because they don't want you to know all of the evil that was done to us. They don't want you to know it. The reality is, I'm literally the first person in my family that was born with the right to vote. This was not that long ago, y'all. And so I want you to understand that the reason why this is such a visceral thing for many of us is that we understand what was sacrificed to get here. We understand how recent this advancement was, and we refuse to go back. We refuse to let people take this away from us. And what's really interesting is that we are fighting much of the same elements that our forefathers fought. We are fighting that same element right now. Their tactics may be different, but their goals are the same. Evil still exists. It just comes now in a justice robe. It just comes now in an expensive suit. It just comes now in a smile to your face, but actions behind your back that are meant to undermine your progress. So we understand that. And this is why you are seeing the record turnout that you're seeing right now in Georgia, in South Carolina, and other places who understand how this is a direct threat and direct disrespect to those who came before us, fought, and died for this right. And we refuse to give them the satisfaction of thinking that we will let them get away with this, because we will not. We will not. That's why it's important. And that's why we will fight. And honestly, that's why we're going to win. Now, you might be wondering, why are we here again? And why is it that there seems to be this intractable group of people who are doing everything they can in order to minimize our power in this moment? I would argue that it's because of a reality that the Democratic Party has yet to face and acknowledge. It's not spoken about, but it's real. And here's what I want to share with you. For me, it really comes as a result of a cohort of individuals who are willing to do everything humanly possible to rig the system in order to stay in power. I've shared before the reality of the Great Replacement theory, this idea that The demographics of this nation are changing. White people are becoming the minority. And there are a group of people who are white supremacists who subscribe to this theory that white people are being, quote unquote, replaced. They're trying to be able to rig the system so that when they are the minority in this country, they will still have power. In fact, there is some research that suggests that it's not even that they are looking to rig the system so much so that they will have power in that system. Many of these people have actually divorced themselves from the ideal of democracy. So here's the thing that the Democratic Party especially needs to understand, and a lot of us, frankly, need to face and understand. When we keep making these arguments around protecting democracy, which is important, especially now that, guess what, we're going to be in the majority, people of color. But we have to understand that a lot of the people who are fighting against us in this moment don't give a damn about democracy. In fact, they're doing everything they can to undermine democracy. There was a study that was done called the World Value Study. And there were a couple of political science professors, one out of Clemson, one out of Texas A&M, that specifically looked at this research and examined findings related to the United States. And what they found was this: white people that said that they don't want to live next door to an immigrant or to people of another race were more supportive of the ideas of military rule or a strongman type of leader who would ignore legislatures and election results. Boom. Who does that sound like? Who does that sound like? So when you're wondering, who are these Trump voters who, no matter what, are still supporting this dumbass? It's these people. It's because he's doing these dumbass things that they want him. So what this research shows here is that white people who are racially intolerant and who believe that people of color will benefit from democracy actually themselves no longer want democracy. If they believe that Black people or people of color writ large would benefit from democracy, they no longer want to support it. They are more likely to support dictatorial rule. They want a dictator. They want a military, strong-armed leader. They want someone who's not going to have fair elections. They want someone who's going to rule via the military. So put this into context with everything that's happening right now. A Trump administration who, until they got the whole thing in Minnesota where they started being shown on camera killing white folk, sending our own military out to our own cities. You have someone here who continuously harps on, quote unquote, stolen elections that weren't stolen. And someone who is doing everything that he can to rig the next set of elections by changing all of these districts. That is exactly what they want. We are mistaken if we believe that they actually want democracy. They don't want democracy. They want a racially driven autocratic system where they will remain in power. Period. And specifically because democracy is majority rule, and they understand that their days as a majority are numbered, then they no longer have a desire to have a democracy. Their desire, in fact, is to undermine democracy. So if you're wondering why we're here in terms of having this intractable group of folk on the far right who are seemingly happy with everything that this fool does, even though they, like the rest of us, are feeling the impacts of this ridiculous economy and everything else, is because they have something that's more important to them that they want to protect. And it doesn't have anything to do with having to pay $5 for gas. It doesn't have anything to do with the economy in terms of prices of everything going up. It doesn't have anything to do with all of the problems that this fool has brought to this country with regards to the war and everything else. For them, it has to do with raw power and their whiteness, and this idea that they want to maintain preeminence in terms of the social hierarchy, such that even if the economy is hurting them, they don't care, because at the end of the day, that's not even what they value most. In fact, if they think that you will benefit from something via democratic means and you're not part of their in group, this is the type of attitude that would say that I would rather suffer if I think that I'm going to create a situation where you're going to suffer more. And here is the kicker. This is the part that it is my hope moving forward that the Democratic Party opens their eyes and realizes these people are not convertible. And they're especially not convertible when the Democratic Party itself tries to avoid the reality of the staunchness of this racist sect within our society. This is about a very stark and staunch white supremacist segment of our society that really, understanding the writing on the wall with regards to their proportion in the population, are saying, fuck democracy. We just want to create a situation where we can rule permanently. This is a desire they have to create an American apartheid-like state where there could be white minority rule forever. That is their goal. It is no reasoning with that. It is no talking them out of that. The good thing, though, is there is latent power writ large throughout the country that if the Democratic Party were to expand their scope and energize, it wouldn't matter. At least as long as the democratic institutions hold, at least as long as we do what we need to do to make sure that we protect the electoral process as much as we can until we can get other people in there to make the major changes that need to happen to roll back the damage that's been done under this administration and to put in place new institutions and structures that would not allow anyone like this to have this type of power ever again. It is absolutely critical that we understand the enemy that we are up against. We cannot wish this away. We cannot act like this doesn't exist. We cannot act like these people are not here. They are here. And right now, we are letting this tyrannical minority run the country because Trump has found a way through bastardizing the Supreme Court by packing it with his people, a Supreme Court that basically has told him he can't do anything that's illegal as president, by putting his minions in all the different places, by having the Justice Department now tell him that basically you can do whatever you want to do. You're not going to have to pay taxes. You can break the law. That's okay. We're not going to go after you with the Department of Justice. We are in a very precarious and dangerous place right now. So this is what we need to do then in this moment. I am very encouraged to see the overperformance that we are showing in the elections that have taken place so far. That needs to continue because the reality is Trump is going to do everything possible to rig the elections. One thing about Trump that is consistent, he's a projector. Everything that he accuses other people of, he is doing. So when he keeps fixating on rigging elections, guess what? He's in the process of doing everything he can do to rig elections. I, for one, don't even believe that he's in the office legitimately right now. Those of you on TikTok have probably been following one of Elon Musk's baby mamas, where she's talking about how Elon Musk rigged the election for him. I believe it. And she's not that there's other evidence that suggests that's the case too. Unfortunately, the Democrats don't have the balls to actually investigate that seriously, but I believe it's the case. However, we can fight back. And the way that we fight back is to look at how other systems like this have come out of it. And recently, we've had an example of that. We saw how Oregon was thrown out of office in Hungary. And it was because there was a mass overperformance at the polls. Mass overperformance. More people voted than they could counteract with their cheating mechanisms. So number one, that needs to happen in the midterms. It needs to happen definitely in the House. It's going to be harder now if more states are successful in redrawing their lines and compromising the number of Black elected officials in Congress. But here's the thing. That could actually backfire on them. Because when you take one district that concentrates the Black vote into one district, and you move that one district and you slice it up into maybe 3 districts that have now more Black people in it, it could have enough Black people in it that could be the margin of victory. You remember how I told you before, I went through a few states where Trump won by this, but the Black vote was more? What if that happened on the district level? And the weapon that they chose to wield against us actually ended up being a weapon that was part of their own destruction. Whereas under the previous system, they would have gotten 1 Black elected official. Maybe under this system, they're going to end up with 3 Democratic elected officials. They may not be Black, but it could actually come to hurt the Republican Party. And definitely on the state level, where districts aren't even an issue, if we overperform, we could help flip the Senate and not just the House. We can make sure that there are more Democratic governors, including potentially Black governors. Like you might even have your first Black woman governor in Georgia. We could overperform when it comes to state legislatures, which is absolutely critical, because when we have control of state legislatures in the South, especially, then we can kill this whole shit about the redistricting. We need to use this weapon that they have wielded against us and flip it against them. They will come to rue the day that they try to take our voting rights away. If we overperform the way we are capable of overperforming in the elections to come, I want you to understand that there is enough of us. There is enough of us in key states to make sure that there is never another Republican elected to president of the United States ever again. Ever. Ever. There needs to be hell to pay for this. Now is the time to think, what can we do to punish them? Winning one election isn't enough. I want to punish them. And then after that, it's really about also then using our power once the Democrats take office to really push them to move fast, push them to do what needs to be done on a broad scale to create the institutional changes that are necessary to make sure that no other madman has the power that this fool has had. First thing needs to be done Supreme Court reform. This Supreme Court is broken. It's political. It's definitely in the back pocket of the Republicans. It needs to be done. They can do that by installing term limits, for example. Please install term limits. The person who served the most time on the Supreme Court right now, I believe, is Clarence Thomas. So God knows, get his funky ass out of there, okay? Term limits. They could do that by increasing the number of people on the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has been expanded over and over and over again in history. There is nothing magical about the number 9. We could go to a different odd number. Let's go to 13. Point is, that's just one example. There's a lot that needs to be done to correct what this just evil monstrosity of a demon has done that's in that White House right now. And now is the time to get serious about making sure that we do everything that we can do to counteract the damage that's happened here. We cannot afford to underestimate what the future plans may even be. Look at all that's happened in just not even 2 years yet. We've got to put the brakes on them during the midterms and then a complete end to it in 2028. We've got to. With all that's happened now, in the short amount of time that they've been in, the amount of damage that we've sustained, the amount of rights that's been taken away, the amount of economic destruction that has occurred, we can't survive 4 years of this. And I'm talking about as a nation. The nation cannot survive 4 years of this destruction. And as I've shared with you, there is a subset of people who actually want that. They don't want the nation to survive. They don't want democracy to survive. They want to create this system where there is military rule that they believe will benefit them, that elections are rigged. That's their end game. And we can't let them have it. There are folks that literally want to be tyrants and are tyrants. And it's up to us to fight against them. The beautiful thing is, we have a history of fighting back. We have a history of winning. And part of what we're experiencing right now is the resentment that comes from being on the losing end, of thinking that you're going to conquer a people and after centuries being unable to do it. But I will tell you what, we've done it before. We will do it again. We are already doing it now. And they will come to rue the day that they tried to come for us, because we're fighting back, we're winning, and we will continue to win. So I hope that this was at least encouraging to you. If you are thinking that, oh my God, look at all this happened to us, I want you to understand that we are fighting back, we are winning, we will continue to win, and there's so much more that's happening. But I will say this is just the beginning. This is the first unofficial week of the summer. I want you to know that this is going to be Freedom Summer 2026. This is just the beginning. There's going to be so much winning. And even when, quote unquote, we lose, we win, because we're going to come back even stronger. Thanks for joining me today for today's episode of Fearless Politics, and I'll see you again soon. Take care.